Hello, this is Ilyana Kadushin, who I am on the Park Slope Food Co-op Environmental Committee. And today I'm sitting down for a little conversation interview with my friend from the past, Diane White, who I met at the Purnell School in New Jersey, who is now Deputy Director of the Adirondack Council. So today we're going to find out a little bit about her and what she's doing and how possibly the Park Slope Food Co-op membership can be mobilized and take action on behalf. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just tell me a little bit about who you are and where you are in the Adirondacks and how you got involved with the Adirondack Council.
Okay. So, and actually, I actually go by Diane White Fish now.
Diane White Fish. Perfect.
So after Purnell, we moved to the Adirondacks where Peter, my husband, had long ties, and moving to someplace in the middle of nowhere, you're looking for some way to be employed. And so the Adirondack Council, long story, kind of came in my radar, and they were looking for someone. I realized where the Adirondack Park, I'd been visiting there. I loved it, but I had no idea how it was managed, how it was protected. And so it became fascinating to me. And I think one of the things that drew me to it, so it's an environmental advocacy group. The Adirondack Park is 6 million acres, half public land, half private land. So there's state agencies that manage both how the public land is used and managed and protected and how the private lands can be developed so that those two are compatible. So whenever government is involved, citizens need to pay attention because government just doesn't always do the right thing.
Yeah.
So
when you go to this land, you're up there and you're seeing this land, and how do you first hear about the Adirondack Council when you're there?
Well, that's a challenge. How do you break through all of the other stuff that's going on? We do underwriting on the public radio stations. We have some print ads that we do. But mostly we do a lot of direct mail. We do Facebook, and so there isn't.
Well, what I meant was actually how you first.
Oh, how I first.
Yeah.
I first learned about it when I was actually living and teaching in New Jersey, because somehow they knew that I was subscribing to Adirondack Life magazine. They sent me something that appealed to me, and we still do that kind of outreach to try and connect with people who somehow have flagged that they have an interest in the Adirondack Park.
So you are getting this magazine. They contact you, and how do you start working for them or with them?
So, I mean, as a citizen?
As a citizen and then as an employee.
Yeah. So now a lot of it's online too. So right now we would do a lot of outreach on Facebook. We do some, targeted posts and things so that if people are interested in the environment, hopefully they'll see what we're working on. We have a very good press guy. So actually, if occasionally you'll see the New York Times will reference the Adirondack Council or or at least they'll pick up on an Adirondack issue. That's often because we have made those good contacts with the New York Times and they're willing to weigh in on an issue. So actually probably that's the first thing is the press, especially New York State press, the Albany Times Union, which is the, Capital Region paper and covers a lot of politics. I guess what I want to hear about is how you became deputy director. How you obviously went from being a citizen who took a great interest in the land and started researching and reading about it. And so do you automatically become in that position, or did you? No, so when I first was looking for I was working at a school helping with their fundraising and met some other people, and the council called and said, "Are you interested? We're interested in you interviewing." So I remembered that I was a member of the council, so I knew what they did. I believed strongly in the park and was passionate about protecting the park, so it just was a logical fit. So I started working there in 2001, helping with the fundraising and membership outreach, which a lot of it is, writing, trying to keep in touch with people so they know what's going on. And then
just eventually, after being there for a long time, we have a new director that came in 2 years ago. So in the interim, I was acting director. And then
so you've been there 14
years.
14 years.
That's
amazing.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Gone by so fast.
Yeah.
So when the new director started, he was eager to have me stay in a leadership role there and work with the staff and be a support to them and, continue to work with the supporters and the board members. And so.
Can you tell me, before we get to maybe more recent issues and things that the Adirondack Council is working on, can you tell me of one sort of real great victory that you feel like the Adirondack Council had?
Well, today we're being a little bit tentative because we don't know the actual details, but there had been a plan. Well, first of all, so with all the increased in the tar sands coming out of Canada, there all of a sudden was increased traffic on the rail line going from Canada down through along Lake Champlain on the western side of Lake Champlain and through the Adirondacks in New York State and all the way to the port of Albany in the capital. So there were hundreds and hundreds of cars of oil tanker cars, DOT-111 tank cars, they were called. And these were the cars that blew up in a city in Quebec a year ago summer and killed 45 people, basically wiped out an entire town. So the good news was that we raised the alarm, worked with a lot of partners on both sides of Lake Champlain and elsewhere to get the federal government to say those tanker cars are not safe. They need to be, reconstituted, refurbished, or taken out of work for the railroad company. So that was great. Then all of a sudden there are 800,000 tanker cars in the United States that need someplace to sit while they decide what they're going to do with them. So then there was a proposal a month or so ago that there's an old rail line that goes up into the Adirondacks, into the heart of the high peaks, which is the most popular recreation area, one of the wildest parts in the park, but there's an old titanium mine there that has a railroad spur that goes up from Saratoga into the base of the mountains. So the rail line announced that they were going to had a plan, if they could, to park 500 oil tanker cars basically in the middle of the wilderness in the Adirondack Park. So the good thing was the local government officials didn't like this idea, the environmental groups didn't like this idea, the citizens didn't like this idea, but because it's federal, the railroads are guided by federal law. There was a big question. The governor wasn't sure the state could do anything. The state agencies
like, who had the jurisdiction?
Who had jurisdiction? So we did a lot of work with lawyers in Washington, D.C. on federal rail law and tried to find those places where we could find some jurisdiction.
And are you saying that just today there was some sort of...
So, and we've been talking to the newspapers. So just today, the rail company announced that they have not found anybody who wants to store the tankers that they were planning on getting, and they're going to revert to the plan that had been approved, which was to use the rail line to haul old tailings out of the mine, which people felt like that was an acceptable use.
Meaning to continue to use the cars as opposed to storing...
They're different cars.
Oh.
Yeah. So the oil tanker cars will not come, and they are going to try and do what they originally had planned to do with the line when they were re-permitted to use it again, which was to haul tailings out of the old mine, which this rock could be used for something else. It's basically an innocuous use. So we're tentative because they haven't said they will never store oil tanker cars. They've just said they're not. For now, they're not.
And there's no law or legislation that kind of came out of this situation that protected this from happening again?
Not yet.
But that's what you're
but I think we're
toward.
hopeful that because they withdrew the plan and that enough people are now paying attention that we can come up with a permanent
solution. Isn't it amazing?
Solution.
I mean, I think one of the things that's blown me away, probably even more so since we've been on the environmental committee, for the last several years and working with groups, either it was on the fracking situation and the Catskills or with Catskill Mountain Keeper and RDC and things like that, of sometimes really being in shock at how little regard some people, can really, it can be like an afterthought. It feels like people kind of divide into two groups. People that look at what you would call the wilderness or nature and parks or preserved lands or resources and look at it in a way of course we don't mess with this. And then the other group of people is sort of the opposite of course we don't mess with this. They're sort of like, what do you mean? It's just land. Right. It's just there. It's like, their mind is so in the way of development and the industrialized sort of thought process of like, you see an open space, you see resources, you fill, you use, and then the other people, like I said, who go, of course we protect. And
it's sort of a short-term, long-term difference too. So the other thing that we're working a lot on now, and we had some success, so the 161,000 acres of former paper company land in the Adirondacks was purchased by the Nature Conservancy in 2007, I think it was. And the plan all along was that part of that would be sold back to a timber company with a conservation easement held by the state of New York, so that the working forest could continue, and there would be some land that would provide pulp back to the mill. So 92,000 went to a timber investment company to do that. So the rest, the governor promised the state would buy it to put it in the public forest preserve. So that's open to the public, and again, the state has to manage it. So the whole thing since then has been the debate between, how much can that land be used? And it's recreational development, so it's not buildings, but it's roads, it's campsites, it's where people can drive trucks, where they can drive snowmobiles, ATVs, where there can be motorboats.
Right, and those kind of details, which is when I have such great admiration. I've done interviews of Catskill Mountain Keeper and that. And when you think about groups like the Adirondack Council, it's like those are the quote-unquote watchdogs, or the people that have their finger on the pulse that are going to assess a request or a situation and say, have we thought of this?
Exactly.
And you're expressing the desire to do this, but have we thought of the consequences? Yeah. Very often the consequences are not in people's thought process when they're of the mind of develop and or not looking at our resources as precious. So that's where the train cars was something very recent, right? And so what's happening also right now? Like what else would you say is sort of a top priority?
So what we're really gearing up for, and where we are really looking for an army of advocates, is part of this former Finch Nature Conservancy land purchased by the state. So some of the land, so the state has to classify it. So in the Adirondack Park, you can have wild forest. The two main categories are wild forest, where you're allowed to have motors, basically, and wilderness, where you can't. So on part of the land that's already been transferred to the state, we compromised. We found a way to have some roads open for hunting access and mountain biking, but protected some lakes. That's the Essex chain. The next big purchase that the governor's promise is going to happen before the end of April, the end of the state fiscal year, is 22,000 acres. It's three lakes, gorgeous. It's the Hudson River, it's the Opalescent River, it's the southern part of the High Peaks Wilderness and Dix Wilderness areas. It's spectacular. But there are some old logging roads on there. So they're already, the conflict is gearing up, the tension between, some sportsmen's groups who might say, we want those roads open, or we at least want them open some of the time. We feel so strongly that this should be wilderness. And it's a political decision. The governor can pretty much make the decision by himself. So New Yorkers can weigh in. And I think one of the things that I love about working for the council is being able to tell people, when you write a letter, when you call the governor's office or your legislator's office, it really makes a difference. And people just always say to me, really? Like, well, really?
Yes, it's so true, Diane. I think I referenced the fracking issue because that was one of the big times that we really galvanized. And the idea here being of like tapping in. So the Park Slope Food Co-op membership is obviously New Yorkers, but also tri-state area, but people that often will enjoy areas like the Catskills or the Adirondacks. These are regions, nature regions, that very often the busy metropolitan New Yorker will go and enjoy and get away and go camping or go vacationing. And so when the fracking issue came up, really tapping into that idea of people thinking about the beautiful land and the precious resources of the Catskills and the water supply and the water reservoir, and hearing about all this talk about drilling and the Marcellus Shale and why, so galvanizing New Yorkers was, suddenly we were having events at the co-op of getting signatures.
Oh, great.
For the governor's office, and there was a lot of street, interaction where people were getting signatures. And
yeah, so we had canvassing this summer.
Canvassing, that was the word I was
Adirondacks.
looking for.
Collected 12,000 signatures so far. So
well, and you made me think about that idea of like people very often. I think fracking is a great example of where you were like, does that kind of signatures and writing and phone calls? I think very often there's this feeling like people feel like it goes into this void, and how impactful is my voice? And then you always can turn around to them and say, well, you're one. And if every single person sort of said that, like, how important is my voice, then we would have a problem. We would have a real deficit of engagement. But the opposite is also really true. Like, if everybody, made a call and did a signature and sort of pointed their energy, like, is what I felt like what happened with the first moratorium with fracking and that real pressure.
That was an amazing citizen success.
That was a great, a great citizen success is a great way to put it. So I agree. And I think, as I was saying to you before we started taping, like the idea of disseminating information and really engaging with people is always that question of like about social media and blogging and reaching out, but also really just tapping into, you always have to make a connection, I think, with the citizen of like why they should be engaged.
Yeah. And that's I would love your help thinking about that, because I think like, people would say to me, well, why should someone in New York care about the Adirondacks if they don't go there, or they don't. And so thinking about how can we help anyone who lives in New York, I mean, New Yorkers is a place to start. I would say anyone in the country feel like this is a legacy. People had the forethought to protect this land 100 years ago. And how can we get more people to feel like we need to care about places like this for the long term?
Well, the
same way people think about Alaska, It's
right.
like everyone loves Alaska.
Right. Well, I'd have to say, I mean, I feel like I've heard of a lot of New Yorkers going to the Adirondacks. Again, a lot of people saying, oh, I've gone up there and we've gone camping, or, or just people's awareness.
Good.
I mean, isn't it true that the Adirondack Park is the largest?
It's the largest park in the contiguous United States.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that some of those, those sort of revered, there's a sense of reverence about those facts.
So, sorry.
Yeah. So no, I was going to say, I think what that has to do is that has to translate.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
So we did some polling. So it was political polling. So we polled 400 households of likely voters, and just to find out what are people's attitudes toward the Adirondacks. And we were amazed at how many people had really positive feelings. Even if they kind of knew it was up there somewhere, but they didn't know too much about it, they still loved it. And the way they talked about it was that not only was it a state treasure, it was precious to the state, it was a national treasure. And so New Yorkers are very proud of it.
That's good. National treasure is very good. Yeah, I think that's what I meant by that reverence. There is a little bit, I mean, there's definitely, people feel that way. Catskill region has its history, and there's definitely a huge pipeline between New Yorkers that go and vacation. Literally a pipeline of people that vacation in the Catskills or have their second homes or their
and get their water from there.
And get their water. And there's a definite strong bond. But I do feel there's that reverence for the Adirondacks. And I can tell a funny little story about, my husband James and I went camping in Indian Lake.
Oh, great.
So, and we went 2 years in a row. The first time when we came in, they gave you a little slip of paper saying the wild animals that you may see while you're in the park. And we were like, oh, are we going to see? And really all we saw while we were there was a chipmunk, I think. We were on, Island Lake, is, for those that don't know, is boat access. Sometimes you're on a full island campsite that's on a full island. Sometimes it's a peninsula. The second time we went back, we went in and the slip of paper had changed, actually, and it said, you will see, not may, but one of them being bears.
Yeah.
And we had a circumstance in the middle of the night where, we were camping and we had a mom bear and cubs come. And it was actually turned out great. But I bring that story up because as we were sitting in our boat waiting for the bears to leave, I was in awe watching this mother and her cub on the beach of this campsite and thinking,
this is amazing. This is not regular camping. Like, and my husband and I can handle this because we're adventurous and we like camping. And look at this, mother and her cubs, and look at this incredible area. And this is, just a couple of hours from New York, from where we are. And that kind of, we're very aware of, we definitely fall on the side of looking at, our wilderness and our nature as precious, and especially in this country, in the United States, feeling that sort of pressure, again, that industrialization pressure, that development, real estate pressure, and feel very much like, which is why, when I spoke to you and wanting to have you come and talk today and see how we can mobilize the membership, because I feel very strongly that, we can't sort of enjoy the land and then not be a part of trying to take care of it. So if you were going to recommend, maybe off the top of your head, 3, not so difficult things to start with that the co-op membership could do to help the Adirondack Council, what would that be?
Well, I mean, a couple things. So one is, we mentioned petition signing. So we have a petition about this Boreas wilderness. So one would be for the co-op to host the petition and start collecting signatures. We also have a postcard that people could take and send directly to the governor. So that would be great. We would love the contact information, because then there'll be hearings that people could go to if they wanted to go a little further.
So first of all, maybe becoming a member.
Yeah, becoming a member, and or a member and advocate. I think we've become clear in our minds. Obviously, we need financial resources to do this work, but that's not what my goal with connecting with you in the food co-op would be to get advocates, people who are willing, if we send an email and we try and make it only when it's really important, and we try and make it really short and easy, to say, please, will you write the governor or the state agencies or the head of the environment committee in the legislature and weigh in on this issue. That would be if people are willing to share their contact information.
So become an advocate, share their information, do things like sending off the petitions and the postcards. And anything besides that you can think of? That's a good, strong start.
That is huge. And again, huge. Because people often, everyone's busy. So even to just stop and write that letter, or we use some software that can send people a template letter. Those are great, except that we know that politicians, it's much more effective if you can type out your own letter and send it. But we do provide that as a way.
So the postcard is sort of your way of doing that.
Is that your way of doing that?
Because then people just have the postcard and they just mail it.
Yeah.
That's great.
And same thing with, if you give us, share your email, then we can send you the template letter, which you can either push a button and send it, if you don't have time for it. But if you can take the extra 5 minutes to use that to come up with your own letter and stick it in an envelope, a real live envelope.
Yeah.
That really,
yeah, isn't it interesting the old-fashioned versus the new fangled, and that's like in looking at how people, like we were just talking about, how do you disseminate information, how do you mobilize your activists, but then also on the other side, how in terms of the people you're politically sending stuff to, what's the most effective? Is it the most effective that they see that Americans took the time and suddenly they've got bags of postcards and things like whoa, all these people took the time to actually write a letter, or all the people that actually take the time to pick up the phone, call someone and like leave a constituent, message, that sometimes that may be more impactful, and resonate more with a politician than feeling like people checked a box on a digital form.
Yeah.
Which now people may be a little more skeptical, like they feel like computerized stuff could be tampered with, and the numbers don't mean anything. I don't know.
It didn't take as much effort. I mean, they'll government officials will say they pretty much count as one if they get 1,000 canned emails. They say, well, that's one from one organization, or so it makes a difference.
And what's the time? So what are we looking at timing wise for this land?
So this is called the Boreas Ponds.
Boreas Ponds.
And so the governor has promised that it will be purchased by April. There's some talk it may happen before the end of the calendar year. So because of that, we're gearing up now, because the thought is that even though the state is going to purchase it, so even though it hasn't happened yet, and the actual decision about wilderness versus wild forest will happen after the purchase, behind the scenes, there's a lot of advocacy going on. And so, it's pretty sure that the people who want to be able to drive trucks in or even use ATVs and that kind of thing are already working for that.
So in terms of advocates, getting advocates and people doing this messaging, you need really the time frame. You need them to mobilize in the next
couple months.
Great. Awesome. And is there a website that they can go to?
So you can go to the AdirondackCouncil.org for now, but we're also, one of our goals is to really bring together a wider coalition of groups, not even under our brand, but under, with a lot of organizations. So we're actually working on a coalition website now. And some other materials that any advocate could use, so that there will be a website where people can pull stuff and share with other people. So sharing, obviously, in this day and age is huge too.
Resources
if we can
and
turn
sharing.
the 17,000 members of the food co-op into however many hundreds of thousands of people.
Exactly. That's part of, a big part of our environmental committee's, purpose is education. And of course, in sort of, being our own watchdog of the environment, of the Park Slope Food Co-op's environmental policy. So basically, we look at them as a market and say, are they being in accordance with their own environmental policy? But then when we work on issues like fracking and outside issues like this out of the store, a big part of what we say to people is that the ripple effect. When we've talked to them about trying to do zero waste and use less plastic in their shopping practice, we always say it's not only important that you recondition your own behavior, but that you at least, if you say to one other person, hey, I'm trying to use less plastic, or I just wrote a postcard on behalf of the Adirondack Council, or I signed this fracking petition. Again, just like I'm that one person, plus I tell one other person, that ripple effect, we've seen that through social media, has been so impactful. So people can go to the AdirondackCouncil.org and they can find out how to become an advocate.
Yeah. Follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, Instagram. I think that's it for us.
Yeah, and Instagram would be good, because if maybe they have an idea about the Adirondack area and the wilderness, and maybe they've never gotten to go, maybe it would be really helpful for them to go to Instagram and look at photos.
Yep.
And
hashtag
appreciate
Adirondacks, hashtag Wild About the Park is one that we use. So.
Well, that's great, Diane. So it's been great talking to you.
Oh, you too. I wanted to mention one other thing before we wrap up, and that we've been very involved in some agriculture projects too. In the Champlain Valley is really sort of the breadbasket of the Adirondacks, just to the west of Lake Champlain. And we're the Commissioner of Ag and Markets, Commissioner Ball, is coming at the end of October to meet with our farmers. And one of the goals is to really figure out how to connect buyers and sellers, so that to help those farmers in the rural upstate New York in the Adirondacks connect with sources in the city.
So that would be another project around the bend too, that our advocacy, and especially at the co-op, where protecting farms and looking at farming practices is a big part of the Park Slope Food Co-op. It's one of the things I appreciate being a member there, that someone's doing that vetting and of product and creating those relationships and supporting small farming. Yeah. Since agriculture is sort of under war in this country. So that, I think, absolutely would probably be an even easier connective topic for Park Slope Food Co-op members. So we'll definitely stay in touch on that and see how we can mobilize. And, you and I will continue our conversation into more specifics out of the interview, of like how, maybe some possible events we can set up, where it'll be like a signing event or a postcard taking event. And we'll talk about all those materials. But I appreciate you coming out here to Brooklyn, New York to talk. And thanks for all the hard work you do up there in the Adirondacks.
I appreciate your interest. I really do.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
We'll look forward to our next beautiful visit to the Adirondacks.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Ilyana. Bye, everybody.